Alright, so hi everybody. Welcome back to another Drawing 102 session. This is week 4 of our 6-week session here. So we are going to learn specifically about color theory right now, rather than the candy aspect of it, but it does lead right into it. So we're going to go ahead and get started for today. So to start with, we're going to be touching base on color theory and what it is, and how to go about it and incorporate it into our works. What I want you guys to do is definitely, I encourage you to take notes today, as well as getting yourself ready to add some color to your drawings, hopefully, if you have the means to do so. So today we'll start with color theory. And color is one of the fundamental elements of art. It is actually an element of art. So if you think about the elements of art, there's line, shape, value, form, texture, space, and then there's color. And so color is one of those elements in art and design. It is important not only to be exposed to color theory, but also to understand color theory. So what is the theory? If color theory was simplified, it can be broken down into 3 basic parts: the color wheel, the color value, and the color schemes. Each part of color theory builds on the previous. So understanding each section of color theory fully will help you better understand its importance in the creation of artwork. Okay, so a lot of this color theory stuff that we're going to go over is something that all of you should sort of be aware of, that from your art education side, whatever art education you may have received prior to meeting with me. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the color wheel. So I'm sure many of you may have seen this exact color wheel. I actually have this one at home myself. You may have seen it in like a Michael's or a Walmart or something like that. They can come in really big sizes and really small sizes. So the color wheel was originally first kind of developed by Sir Isaac Newton, by taking the color spectrum and bending it into a circle. If you follow around the color wheel, you will find the same order of the spectrum, of the color spectrum. So we're looking at red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and then violet. And sometimes this can be referred to by the acronym Roy G. Biv. How many of you have ever heard of the acronym Roy G. Biv before? Perfect. Some of you may never have heard of it. I can tell you that you do kind of touch on it a little bit in science class, probably over art class, more than likely. I know with like physics, especially with looking at like the light spectrum, it's the same thing. The light spectrum basically takes that crystal, shines a very powerful light through it, and on the other side comes out the colors of the rainbow, basically. So this is the acronym Roy G. Biv. That's how you can remember it. Roy, red, orange, yellow; G, green; B-I-V, Biv, blue, indigo, and violet. It is made up of 3 different types of colors overall. There are the primary colors, the secondary colors, and then the tertiary colors. So we're going to kind of have a little bit of review here. What are the primary colors? You're close, Peyton. Close. Anybody else want to try and guess? Primary colors. These set of colors are the original colors. It might spark a little bit. Sort of. So the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. Okay, so make sure you guys have this written down or saved somewhere because this is important. The primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. They are called the primary colors for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that no two colors can be mixed to create a primary color. You cannot create red by mixing orange and blue. That cannot happen. You just cannot do that. The second reason is all other colors can be found on the color wheel by creating, which can be created by mixing the primary colors. So the primary colors make all the other colors. Our basic colors, the basic colors, just like the basic shapes in painting or anything like that, is the primary colors. So we see this, just bringing in a little bit of art history, and we see this in the ancient cave paintings at the Chevaux Pont-Ont, the Lascaux, the Pecmerel, and the Altamira cave paintings. They all contain some of the best known samples of prehistoric painting and drawing, including these primary colors. They range from almost about 30,000 years old and dating back to about 15,000 BCE. There are other cave paintings that are known, and I believe there was one recently discovered not too long ago that dates back to almost, I want to say maybe 85,000 years ago, so a lot older than some of these that I have mentioned here. However, the ones that I have mentioned here have the most best known samples and are the most preserved because they haven't been looked at over the centuries and years with human hands and things like that. The image that we actually have here comes from the Hall of Bulls in the Lascaux Cave. And you can actually tour the Lascaux Cave virtually. And I'll actually pull up the link here, so just give me 1 second while I get it. But you can actually virtually tour it. At this point in time, it is now closed to the public, so the image that you guys see here is actually a replica of the actual wall. Unfortunately, they had it open to the public for a number of years. I believe it was discovered in the 1940s by two boys and their dog. However, since it's been open to the public, it started to kind of erode the paintings and the drawings. And so in order to preserve it, they ended up having to close the cave officially and only be able to provide absolute replicas of the cave. So that's the unfortunate side of it. However, like I said, there is a virtual tour, and I actually have the link here. So let me go ahead and send this to you guys. And it's really interesting if you're willing to walk through as a virtual tour. This gives you the official images of the actual cave. Everything that you see on this website, the virtual tour, is not fake. This is completely real. It is a European website, so you may have to keep it in the English, which is EN. But if you click on the menus and then, let's see here. I think it's just a visit to the cave and just clicking through the images, it'll kind of take you straight through it. It'll also play music for you and things like that. So take your time to watch it whenever you can. You don't have to do it while we're here today. But it's really interesting because this is really the only way you'll ever be able to really see and view this particular cave in person, really. But yeah, so cave paintings, even though you may not think of it, have the best known samples of red, of black, of yellow, and of blue. So prehistoric humans used pigments made from plants as well as burnt wood to create charcoal and to create most of the colors visible, especially here in the Hall of the Bulls. at the Lascaux cave. So here we actually see the horses. I think the horse is the main picture here. And with that horse, it is colored in more of a reddish brown. And the way they would go about doing that would be kind of mixing a little bit of red ochre with some plant-like material. And they would grind it down into a pigment or squeeze out basically the pigment of the plants and of the material, mix it up with a little bit of water or some kind of paste or something that they may have had at the time, and then paint it directly on the wall. So you can see the horse here specifically. The black parts would be for charcoal. You also kind of see this antler deer type animal over here, which would have been on there. Another way for the cave paintings, if you guys have ever seen the handprints, I don't know if this is something that you guys have seen before, but a lot of different cave paintings, specifically at the Chevaux de Pont d'Arc, actually has this, where they would blow the pigment colors over their hand and it would just leave the negative space of the hand. Remember we were talking about negative space? They would actually do that and have handprints all over the walls. So this is definitely something that would have the different original pigments of red, yellow, and blue. And again, it would be primary colors. So let me kind of brainstorm with you guys. What plants have you guys come across that may have left a bit of color that you can recall? So maybe playing outside or anything like that. Have any of you ever experienced kind of like this color that may have been left on your clothes or on your hands or anything like that? So one thing that came to my mind when I was first learning about this many, many years ago was dandelions. How many of you have ever played around with dandelions, maybe rubbed it on your skin a little bit, and it would leave like this yellowish tintish color behind, right? Have any of you ever experienced that before? I know when I was a little kid, we used to do what we would call the butter test, which would basically be like, take your dandelion and rub it on your skin, and if it shows up yellow, that means you like butter. And, you know, that was a really interesting test as a young child, but the reason that that yellow color would show up on your skin is because you're rubbing the pigment onto your skin. It's the same thing that they would do for these caves. Another thing that comes to mind is if you play soccer or football or anything like that, grass stains, right? You skid on the grass and you got a big green stain on your jeans or on your jacket or, yeah, exactly, the chlorophyll. It is pigment, right? It's a pigment. And so that would also be used. Granted, we don't see a lot of the green because eventually it fades away. But that is something that we would normally see. And we'll actually talk about green and where it is on the color spectrum as well. Another thing that I could think of very easily is dirt. How many of you have ever played in dirt or some sand? You play around with it on your hands, and then you look at your hands after it dries, and it leaves this kind of brownish, reddish stain. If any of you ever experienced that before, I know Pennsylvania has that red clay, that it does that. Pennsylvania is very specific for that. But if you've never experienced it, that's okay. But if you have, it's something very similar. That pigment, that after color basically stays. And that's what these caves kind of go into, and that's how prehistoric humans kind of made these colors and placed them on the cave. The other nice thing about these caves is that they're very preserved out of the elements of weather and things like that, so they did not get destroyed over the many centuries. So another ancient culture that used a lot of these primary colors would be ancient Egypt. So here on the left, we have a very, very well preserved life-size painted limestone funerary sculptures of Prince Rahotep and Nofret. And these two are brightly painted. This is not a artist rendering. This picture right here is of the original sculpture, okay, with the original paint on it. And really, what you can see here is black. You can see whites. You can see a couple variations of blue and red, right? And that is literally what they painted. They did this on all their sculptures. So you want to think about it whenever you see ancient Egyptian sculptures, even if they're broken, they were once very colorful. They were once, inlaid with jewelry and various limestones and rocks and things like that too. This happens, these two sculptures just happen to be very well preserved to have the paint on there. So much of our understanding of primary colors and ancient art history derives from Egypt as well, because of these well-preserved painted walls and statues. And they were also, very much like the caves, hidden from the weather elements for many, many centuries. So the last example that I have here is the painted sunk relief of the king being embraced by a goddess. This is within the tomb, and I'm going to butcher his name here, but it's Amenhotep, I believe. It's really hard to pronounce. But as you can see here, this is completely preserved. This is not tampered with in any way, shape, or form. They discovered it this way. And as you can see here, there's some red ochre right here within the skin of the king, right? You've got a lot of yellowish gold going on here to represent the goddess. And then you have the blue here representing the headpiece, as well as the goddess's hair and necklace. And then you do have the red on her crown, as well as with the writing on the wall. The reason we call this sunken relief, if you're kind of wondering about it, is because this is not actually popping out towards us. It's actually into the wall. It's actually pushed inward, which probably helped this wall piece stay preserved as well. So we see this a lot with a lot of ancient Egyptian fresco paintings, wall coverings within temples, as well as some of the papyrus parchments that have been painted on. One of the famous ones, I believe, is the Book of the Dead, right? It's been painted on, and it has those original colors, and we can even just pick up a couple of the colors from the wall or from those papers and chemically examine them and figure out exactly what elements, what plants, what other chemicals did they use to create those paints. So that's the really nice thing, is that it ended up saying preserved. So when you typically see like your typical Egyptian wall or something like that, and it doesn't have a lot of color on it, that's because the paint eventually came off. But everything was painted. There's always a little bit of a resemblance, and usually the ones that are preserved are in the tombs because they've been sealed over the many centuries. There are certain tombs that were raided in multiple times and things like that too, and that have now been exposed, and we do see that the paint is starting to come off because of that. So a lot of the tombs tend to get restored multiple times throughout the years. And it does cost money for these restorations, but art conservatives as well as archaeologists work towards keeping those original pigments because we are able to figure out what they used, so we're not adding, acrylic or something to a wall that never accepted acrylic to begin with. So that's like the cool thing about these colors, especially in ancient history. So again, let me ask you guys, what are the primary colors? Oh, anyone can answer. What are the primary colors? Wonderful. Red, yellow, and blue. Perfect. So moving on, we're going to talk about the secondary colors. So the secondary colors are orange, green, and purple or violet. Can be called either or. They are created by mixing the equal parts of any two primary colors. So for instance, yellow and blue will make green. Blue and red will make violet. And red and yellow will make orange. So when you're looking on the color wheel, you got your primary colors, right? Right here, here, and here. And then your secondary colors are here, here, and here. And the reason we call them secondary colors is because we can use the primary colors to make them. Remember, none of the colors on the color wheel can make the primary colors, but the primary colors can make everything on the color wheel. So, primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Secondary colors are the mixtures of those, orange, green, and purple. Then we come up with this weird term, tertiary colors. Now, the tertiary colors are created by mixing equal parts of a primary color and a secondary color. So, for instance, if we mixed red and orange together, what would we get? And you can use the color wheel to help you. If we took red and orange and we mixed them together, what would we create? So if we did red and orange, we would end up creating this color, which is just basically called red-orange. So if we took orange and yellow, we would create a yellow-orange. Yellow and green, we would create a yellow-green color. If we took green and blue, we would get this blue-green color. If we did blue and violet, we would get the blue-violet color. And then if we did violet and red, we would get a red-violet color. As you look at this color wheel and understand the tertiary colors, which are basically the mixtures of a secondary color and a primary color, what I want you guys to notice is how we call them. We refer to these tertiary colors is by listing the primary color first, followed by the secondary color. Now, you may be familiar with certain colors like turquoise, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of Crayola colors. Pink, or I can't think of any other kind of Crayola colors. Can you guys think of any of like the Crayola crayon colors? I know Crayola is very famous for this, where they ended up titling a lot of the colors these random, like, I don't know, blueberry blue, or I don't know, lime green, or something like that, right? So a lot of these terms that we have are made to just have us have it and associate it with simple terms. But in art, we don't call them lime green. We don't call it pumperwinkle purple, or, I don't know, a Granny Smith apple green, or something like that. We don't call it those. We call them by the tertiary colors. Okay, this crayon is a little more red-violet. This crayon's a little more red-orange. This one's yellow-orange. This one's a blue-green instead of turquoise. This one's a blue-violet instead of, I don't know, indigo, I guess. Indigo would be a blue-violet, basically. So in art, we have specific terms for the colors, whereas in the general population, everyone can think of these colors, if you say it, based off of the terms that we're familiar with. And like I said, Crayola is one of those companies that produces a lot of different colors, and they have a lot of great products, but they don't keep it true to what the way that artists would want to address it if they were looking at the colors a certain way. So again, with tertiary colors, they are created by mixing the equal parts of a secondary color to a primary color. And when you look on a color wheel, they are always in between the primary and secondary colors. So for review, just to see where we are, can someone list for me the secondary colors? So what are the 3 secondary colors? Well, to answer my question, the secondary colors are orange, green, and violet, or purple. Okay, the primary colors again are red, yellow, and blue. The secondary colors are orange, green, and violet. And then how do we get the tertiary colors? Or how would we title the tertiary colors, really? So if I had blue and violet, what would I make? If I had equal parts of blue and equal parts of violet, what would the tertiary color be? So if I had blue and violet, my tertiary color would be blue-violet. That's what it would be. Okay? So just to recap, because I'm not quite sure if everyone's getting it. Primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. They are the only colors that cannot be made from other colors. So they are the original OG colors, if you want to think of it that way. Secondary colors are orange, green, and purple or violet. And then those tertiary colors are the mixture. So we're going to talk about the values of colors. So when I mention pure hue, what I mean is the main color. So for instance here with both of these gradients, we have the color blue, right? So with color values, we take the pure hue of a color and we add white to it to make the tints, or we add black to it and make the shades. Okay? And the more white you add into the color, the lighter and lighter and lighter it gets. Eventually, we can turn that blue into white because we're adding so much white. The same goes for the opposite. We can add a little more black each time when mixing a color to the point where the color ends up being black. So that is color values. It's just like the grayscale. If you think of the grayscale, we have going from dark to the darkest point, which is what, 10, and then going to the lightest point, which is 1. And all we're doing is we're just adding more and more black to the white, and eventually we get black and vice versa. So when we talk about color values, you're going to add that pure hue, blue, red, orange, violet, any of the colors on the color wheel, and you add white to it, it starts to get lighter with those tints. And if you add black, it starts to get darker with those shades. So color schemes, there's a lot of different color schemes and many different ways of putting the main colors on the color wheel together. Okay? And we're going to look at each one of them individually. Now on the color wheel, any color wheel that you get, usually on the back side, you'll actually see something very similar to what you see on the screen here. Notice under the main color, there are 3 kind of shades almost, or 3 different types of color. And on the actual color wheel, it'll actually list them. So closest to the center is going to be a shade of that color, which means that we mixed black with it, and that's what we got. The centerpiece is going to be the tone of the color, and the tone of the color is where we mixed gray with it. So it ends up being a little bit of a grayish kind of color. And then the top part right below the pure hue is going to be the tint. And what we mean by that is that we added white to the color. Okay? And then you're going to see something in the middle here, which has arrows pointing and everything like that. We're going to talk about these specifically. So again, there's various different color schemes and various different ways of putting these colors together in a painting or a drawing. There's monochromatic, analogous, complementary colors, a color triad or a tetrad, split complementary, warm colors, and cool colors. Some of these may start to kind of pop up and you may be familiar with some of these color schemes already. I think the ones that almost everybody's very familiar with would be the warm colors and the cool colors. But some of these other ones you may never have heard these terms before, and that's fine. But these are just different ways to put all of these colors together to make them work within a painting. So the first thing we're going to look at is monochromatic. It is, I believe, a Latin term, mono meaning one and chroma meaning color. So when you think of monochromatic, what we mean by that is one color. So this color scheme is made up of one color with its shades and its tints. Okay, so we have the pure color, the pure hue of violet, about the center of this gradient scale, right? And then as we go to the left of the screen, we're adding white. As we go right of the screen, we're adding black. So a monochromatic piece would be using one color. And we're actually going to look at various famous paintings that use monochromatic as an example. But that is monochromatic. Again, mono meaning one and chroma meaning color. Monochromatic. Monochromatic. The next one is going to be analogous colors. So colors that are directly next to each other on the color wheel. That's what analogous is. So if we looked at the color wheel, let me take you back here. And I was looking at the bottom part here, and I wanted 3 analogous colors. Can someone name me 3 analogous colors on this bottom part of the color wheel? Remember, analogous colors are directly next to each other. So can someone list 3 analogous colors? Okay, so let me help you guys out. But before I do, can you all give me a green check mark? Okay, I just wanted to make sure you guys can hear me because I've asked you guys several questions and nobody's answered. So I was a little worried there. So an analogous color, if you think of it, is the colors directly next to the color wheel. So an analogous color would be, for instance, violet, red-violet, and red, because they're directly next to each other on the color wheel as you go around. Okay, see how violet's here, red-violet is here, and red's right here. So analogous colors, again, are directly next to each other on the color wheel. When you use a color scheme such as analogous colors, it can be very dramatic of a color scheme for your artwork. So for instance here, if you guys are looking at your screen, we have a red-violet, a violet, and a blue-violet, right? And just by looking at it, I can already kind of tell how extreme and dramatic the red is versus the blue-violet, right? You can see that the blue-violet is sort of kind of merging into the background, and I feel like this red is so extreme that it's actually kind of hurting my eyes a little bit, right? And that's the point. That's what analogous colors do. There's this kind of dramatic, almost kind of like an extreme kind of color scheme going on between these 3 or 4 colors. Complementary colors. This is probably something that many of you are familiar with here. So complementary colors are colors that are found directly across from each other on the color wheel. This color scheme can provide a very strong contrast between the colors. So just by looking at this screen right now, we have blue and we have orange. And blue is completely on the opposite side of the color wheel to orange. And it ends up adding this kind of contrast where the centerpiece, it should feel like they're fighting for, like the colors are fighting for that central focus, basically. I don't know if you guys can see it here, but I can see it on my big screen. All right. So if we look at the color wheel, again, blue's right here, completely on the opposite side of it is orange, right? So that's what the center arrow is all about on the color wheel. So on this color wheel, what is it pointing to right now? What are the complementary colors that it's pointing to? And if you can't quite see it, let me know. I can zoom in. Or you can zoom in. So we have one side pointing to red, and what would be the opposite of red? What is its complementary color? The opposite of red would be green. The best way to remember something like this is, especially with red and green, I think of like Christmas colors, holiday colors, right? Especially towards the winter time. Even if you don't celebrate Christmas yourself, there's a lot of red and green involved, right? So that's how I kind of remember complementary colors. The opposite of red would be green. It's a primary with its opposite secondary color. With blue being a primary, the opposite would be orange. With violet being its primary, yellow being the primary, the opposite would be violet. If I took a yellow-green and I wanted to know its complementary color, I would look on the color wheel and say, oh, well, what's on the opposite side of yellow-green? It would be red-violet. What about blue-green? Well, if I look at blue-green on the color wheel and I look directly across from it, it should be red-orange. So that's the complementary colors, and they add contrast. There are some artists that work specifically in complementary colors. There are some that have gotten very famous for it. I can tell you at least with the primary colors for sure, would be Piet Mondrian with the lines and the straight edges. Picasso was very familiar with using these color schemes in his artwork. He ended up using a lot of them, various ones throughout all of his works. He did a lot of different paintings. So artists were really into the whole complementary colors. It really kind of started right with the Impressionists, I believe, or slightly before that point in time. So we're talking about like Van Gogh or Monet or Cezanne. Those are the Impressionist movement of the mid to late 1800s. And they were really into this kind of color scheme. And using these various color schemes to create and invoke different emotions and feelings within their artwork. And then this kind of continued into modern day with abstract artists and post-impressionists. Another type of color scheme would be color triads. So this color scheme consists of 3 colors found on the color wheel that are equally spaced apart from each other. The most famous example would be the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Another example would be orange, green, and purple. They are evenly spaced out. So when you're looking at the color wheel again, they end up forming this 3-pointed triangle. That's the best way to remember a triad. An equally sized triangle on all 3 sides. And I believe the degrees, if we're thinking about math for these, would be, I want to say 45-degree angles, I believe. If anybody can remember about the degrees of an equally spaced triangle, I believe it would be 45-degree angles. It's very, very standard triangle. So the most famous and easiest example would be red, blue, and yellow. Now, split complementary is a little bit different. With split complementary, it takes the main color and its complements closest to basically the analogous colors. So for an example here, we have green as the main color. And then we ended up having a red violet with a red orange, because we know the opposite of green is red, but what's directly next to red on the left and the right? Well, red orange and red violet, and that is its split complementary. So when we look at the color wheel again, it's this kind of skinnier triangle. Rather than the really evenly spaced out, it's the skinnier one. So here we have green, and it's split complementary of red violet and red orange. And then we move on to these two types of color schemes, such as warm colors. So this particular color scheme is usually associated with warm things. When we look at red, orange, and yellow, what kind of things pop in your head when you look at these three colors? Does it evoke a certain emotion in you when you look at these three colors? Okay, so happiness. When we call them warm colors, sometimes I think of like summertime or maybe even fall. Especially in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has some beautiful fall colors when the leaves start to change. And they tend to change into these colors, right? The red, the orange, and the yellow. Yes, it scientifically can be explained through chlorophyll and, the trees not having a lot of the sap reaching to the leaves, and the leaves are changing colors because they're not reaching all the water, and the sun ends up burning them a little bit, and that's why they change these colors. Yes, but when we look at these colors in general, we think of happiness, maybe warmth, maybe, since it's wintertime, I don't know if you guys have fireplaces, but sometimes, warmth can come from that fire, right? And the fire will have yellow, orange, and red in it. So warm colors are typically associated with very warm things. Then we have the opposite ones, which are cool colors. And what do you think of when you see cool colors? Green, blue, and purple. Or what kind of emotion do you feel when you see these types of colors? Okay, so the ocean, water, right? Perfect. Any kind of season that may pop into your head a little bit with these type of colors? It doesn't have to be a season, but I know for me, it happens a lot. I always think things with seasons sometimes. So with these type of colors, we think of water, of rain. Sometimes the emotion could be sadness. Sometimes season-wise, it could be winter, right? Especially with snow. Usually snow is white, but when there's a lot of it, there tends to be this kind of like almost blue hue to it almost. Some of you may realize this with some snow paintings or something like that. Same with spring. Sometimes spring has these colors as well, because things are starting to grow back. So cool colors and warm colors are opposite of each other, but it does invoke various emotions and responses, and artists capture that when trying to convey a message or something within their work. The last thing we're going to talk about here before looking at some examples in famous paintings is neutral colors. So neutral colors are the black, white, gray, and brown. And a lot of the times, the range of brown that you may see on here could be called earth tone colors. They represent dirt and bark on trees and rocks and things like that. So these tend to be the neutral colors. When you mix any of these colors, any of the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, with these, we end up getting a different set of colors. So for instance, with gray, we end up getting the neutral tones of each of the colors. So with white, we end up getting the tints of those colors. With black, we end up getting the shades of those colors. With browns, we end up getting this sort of gray neutral color, but it starts to end up being perfect for like the flesh tones if you're ever doing portraits. That's definitely something that a lot of these browns and earth tone colors are used for mostly. So neutral colors tend to be that neutral space, right? It ends up being, you can kind of leave it or take it, and it ends up kind of leaving just this kind of blah kind of color that you can just kind of rest on with all this brightness and darkness around you, right? Depending on the painting. So we're going to learn about color schemes in art history. So here I have a famous painting by the lovely guy, Vincent van Gogh, and these are part of his Sunflower series. So looking at the colors here, what colors or color scheme is he using? Is he using primary colors? Is he doing tertiary colors? Is he doing cool colors, warm colors, complementary colors? So yeah, warm colors is definitely one scheme that you see here. You have yellow, green, and beige. So you have, what is yellow, green, and beige? If you think of the color wheel, is yellow directly next to green? Or is there a color in between? So for instance, I would say he is using analogous colors, right? We have yellow, we have a yellow orange, we have a yellow green, and then we have a green. And all of those colors are directly next to each other on the color wheel. Again, warm colors are perfect. We have a little bit of blue here, right? To show us that horizon line towards the bottom of the pot, right? And we have a little bit of black just to kind of show some darker tones within the piece itself. And typically, when you look at something like this, I mean, what kind of emotion are you feeling when looking at this particular painting? Are you content? Are you really happy? Do you feel relaxed? Are you sad? What kind of emotion are you feeling when looking at this particular piece? Okay, so you kind of have this sadness a little bit because the flowers are wilting a little bit. However, some other people, granted, this is just how you feel, but some other people, for me, for instance, I feel a little bit more calm. I feel like it's a bit more relaxed, and I think it's because of those warm colors that give you that kind of sense of relaxation a little bit. There's not a lot of anxiety or fear involved in it. It's just, you know, a little more relaxing, a little more calm. So I have another painting here by Monet. Claude Monet, who's very famous for his water lilies, but he also did some outside painting with atmosphere and cityscapes. So looking at this particular painting, what color schemes are sticking out to you right away? I can kind of help you with this. For me, since this is a sunset, I see warm colors. But what's another type of color scheme that you are seeing being used in this painting? Right, cool colors, right? With the city and the shadows of the water. There are some browns, earth tone colors, some neutral colors, right? So you can see how it's starting to work. And by looking at the cityscape, does it feel like it's receding or pushing back in the painting, or is it popping forward? Is it coming towards you, or does it feel like it's kind of sitting back, like almost in like a background compared to the reflection of the ocean in the sky? What does it feel like to you? What's that relationship? Right. There is sort of a reflection of the town in the water, right? Sort of. Yeah. And to be honest, with the relationship between warm colors and cool colors, warm colors tend to pop out. Sort of when you look at it, it feels like it's kind of extreme. It's kind of like glaring at you almost. Whereas the cool colors sort of recede back, right? They kind of get back into space. They don't feel like they're coming at you, whereas the warm colors would be coming towards you. So that's the relationship between the two within this famous painting. And that's what Claude Monet wanted to indicate, not only just to show atmosphere. That was his big thing, was atmosphere and all the colors in the atmosphere with fog and other things as well. But also using these color schemes, because like I said, Impressionists are really the ones that kind of started this really strongly. Here is a painting from someone that you may never have thought of painted, but Winston Churchill, who was a famous prime minister for England. He was also famous in, I believe, World War I and II, I think. Really? I'm very bad at my history with that aspect. But this is Winston Churchill, a very famous guy. And he dabbled in painting a little bit, especially in his later years. Now, with this particular color scheme, what do you notice the most? What is his overall theme with this painting? His theme is summer, yes, but what kind of color scheme, though? Things that we discussed. What kind of color scheme do you see mostly? For me, I see a lot of greens, a lot of blues. What does that indicate to you? Right. So he was using mostly some analogous colors, right? Which are all kind of right next to the color wheel there. But at the same time, I feel like he was using a lot of cool colors for this particular painting. There's not a lot of extreme warm colors. If you look at this painting next to this painting, you can tell which colors are warm and which colors are cool. Whereas this one, I feel like it kind of gives you a more of a calm, relaxing summer evening. Or maybe a late spring evening, or late summer, early fall evening with some of the trees changing. And it gives you that kind of cool color, relaxing, calm manner as well. And notice that he's using a lot of browns. There's a lot of neutral colors within this painting as well. And that's the relationship within a painting and using colors together. Last painting that we're going to look at is going to be Vermeer. He's a very famous artist, I think post-Renaissance artist. And here, what colors stick out to you right now? There is a color scheme happening, one that we've discussed. Right, there are some cool colors, some muted colors, but I'm talking about specifically with the lady. There's let's see if you guys can catch it. It's the primary colors. There's red, there's blue, and there's yellow, right? Red, or I'm sorry, I pointed at yellow. Red, blue, and yellow. These are the primary colors. He is literally using the primary colors within this painting. And he's using the tints and shades of these primary colors. Notice with yellow with a little bit of black is adding those shadows. Blue with a little bit of black is adding those dark blue colors, and same with the red. So you can even see that this color theory dates even further back, right? And Vermeer was around before Claude Monet or Cezanne or Winston Churchill or any of those other artists. He was around maybe in the 15 or 1600s, right? Or maybe it's 1600s. And he was just using the primary colors for his main piece because obviously the figure is the main focal point, right? That's the center of the painting, and that's kind of where our eyes kind of rest, and then we follow along with the woman pouring the milk and the bread. It's sitting on the table with some of the muter colors kind of receding in the background as if we're kind of ignoring them, and what's really sticking out would be the primary colors. So that's how artists use these color schemes within their artistic works, and that's how us as artists are analyzing it. So what I want you guys to do is I want you in your sketchbook to draw out the color wheel. You can Google the color wheel, you can print out any of the copies of the color wheel if you'd like, but in your sketchbook I want you guys to draw out the color wheel, including everything that we discussed today, and you can Google all of it. It's very easy. And I want you to practice your shading with whatever color materials you can use. Remember last week we were talking about 1-point perspective and doing a bedroom scene? Try to add color to that and think about the color schemes that we talked about within your room. Maybe just by looking around wherever you were drawing, what colors do you see? Are there certain colors that are working together that you can instantly recognize? Things like that. So I know we went over time a little bit, and I do apologize, but does anybody have any questions about using the color wheel or anything like that? Again, it takes a while to understand a lot of color theory, but if you're able to get a color wheel or create your own, it helps you visualize it better. But does anybody have any questions? Okay, perfect. So at this point, I'll go ahead and dismiss you guys. But for your assignment, I just wanted to let you guys know you can always re-watch this presentation in the recordings, and I encourage you to do so while you create your color wheel. But aside from that, I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Next week, we're going to be drawing our favorite candies. So if you guys are able to obtain your favorite sweet treat, then go ahead and do that for next Thursday. Thank you guys so much. Have a fantastic weekend.